As the year itself has unfolded, it's happened differently than I expected, but it's confirmed my sense that this year of grace has itself been grace, that it really has been the work of the Holy Spirit. I don't think I'm quick to make that judgment, but this year of grace, as it's unfolding, has had, to me, all the signs of being the work of the Holy Spirit. So in that sense, it's meant a lot to me personally, but we've been overtaken by certain events, one of which was the election of the new Pope and the resignation of Pope Benedict, but that's been an extraordinary set of events, the election of the new Pope and the aftermath of all of that. But that in itself, I think, has been grace, an unexpected grace, but grace always comes out of nowhere. It always comes from out of the blue, and that one certainly did. But also a thing like the Royal Commission, which can look more of a burden or even a scourge than grace, I like to think is a severe kind of grace that we are being offered at this time. I think to see it in any other terms is not to see it in the light of the gospel. So we've been overtaken, as it were, by unexpected grace, but at the same time the whole thing has been an experience of focusing upon what's there at any time, which is the gift of God, but seeing it more clearly and more simply and more deeply. And for me, that has been a remarkable experience and a gift in itself. It's also been, for me, my first year as the Archbishop of Brisbane. And I'd have to say that this year of entering into the life of Brisbane and the Church of Brisbane has been an extraordinary experience of grace for me. So to have that coincidence of the year of grace and my own first year as the Archbishop of Brisbane, for me at least, in a very personal way, has been a remarkable experience, and one that will mark the rest of my life, just as it gathers up in many ways all of my life that has gone before. How has the year of grace been received around Australia? Well, that's been another surprise for me, because I was unsure how the people would receive it. I was unsure in the first place how the bishops would receive it, but then I was unsure how the people around Australia would receive it. I thought they might just shrug their shoulders and say, oh, well, here we go again. But that hasn't been the case, because I have heard all the stories, from Broome to Brisbane, from Darwin to the Derwent, and the stories they've been simple, deep stories. And one of the great strengths of this year of grace has been precisely its simplicity. And I think what's really struck a chord in the hearts of many, many Catholic people has been that sense of going back to the basics at a time when we're under pressure and when we can forget the basics. I think also it's been one of the very refreshing things about Pope Francis. I mean, you have to ask the question, why has his election and his style struck such a chord in the hearts of many people, not just church people, but people way beyond the bounds of the church? I think one of the answers is that sense of going back to the basics, that sense of something being very simple and uncluttered, focusing upon what really matters. So you see that, I think, in Pope Francis, and it is deeply refreshing. But I think the year of grace is somehow consonant with that. It's given people a sense of going back to the basics, contemplating the face of Jesus. In other words, going back to Jesus and how easily we can forget Jesus. It sounds extraordinary to say it, but it can happen. So going back to him and the contemplation of his face, in other words, that sense of God with us, God who has a face, isn't up in some faraway heaven, but whose face we can actually see and contemplate, and all of that is a way of going back to the deepest basics. So I think that's one of the reasons why people have responded more enthusiastically, more generously than I thought they would, right around Australia.